back to our lecture then that we were discussing. And I'm sharing the screen now, I hope, with everybody. Let's see, I'll try this again. To share this lecture. Let me see, can everybody see that, the lecture now?
Yes,
okay.
We can see, and you? Can you use it as well? Okay.
Yes. So that's where we finished before the pause. We finished here. And so the 1970s, right? Remember that Norway decided not to join the European community. They were invited to join. The government wanted to join, but they decided to give a referendum to the people, and the people of Norway decided not to. And that actually happened 2 times with Norway, that the people rejected the joining of the European community. Again, why? Well, Norway, like the United Kingdom, is a very independent country, and they have relatively good economy. You know, Norway is oil-rich country. They have oil, this offshore oil. So I think for many reasons, Norway decided not to join, and today still is not a member of the European Union. 1973, the British, Denmark, and Ireland finally joined the EC. It's kind of interesting when you think that the British, they tried so hard to come to the community and later the Union, and then they tried so hard to get out of it. So that's kind of interesting. 1974-75, they created the European Council we talked about. I'll tell you more about that later. 1979, we make progress with European monetary system, which will lead to the euro. In 1979, we had the creation of the European Parliament. Students, I just want to say one thing about this. Before 1979, it was often called the European Assembly, which is a parliament, assembly. But there were no direct elections. The members of this assembly were appointed to it, appointed by the member states. But this is the first time where the citizens of member state countries can vote directly for members of this now parliament, this European Parliament, direct parliamentary elections. And here it is a little bit in Ukrainian, what we talked about. Okay, continue. Now we come to the 1980s. We're almost finished with our lecture. And Greece joins the European community. And, you know, students, in 1986, you can see Portugal and Spain join. Now, remember, these were 3 countries that had dictators. Still in the 1970s, they were under the dictatorship. So this was, at that time, a program to motivate them to be democratic countries, to motivate them to be open market countries. Today, it's a little different philosophy. Today, countries that want to come into the European Union have to already prove they are stable democracies and market economies. But in the 1980s, they had a different philosophy. It was to help them along, to help them become more democratic, more liberal, more market-oriented. In 1985, there's the Schengen Agreement. Maybe you know about the Schengen Agreement, which is the removal of all border controls, not just against goods, but people and movement of money and capital across borders. Yeah, that's the Schengen Agreement. And the Schengen Agreement originally was a separate agreement among European countries. It was not part of the European community, but later it was incorporated into the European Union as part of the EU, the Schengen Agreement, okay? 1986-87, we have another treaty. This one's called the Single European Act. This was really important because what it did, it made the European community, remember, we still have a community now, not a union. It made it a common market by January 1993. That was the target date. And what is common market? Free flow of goods, but not only goods, people, capital, services, all of this across member state borders. No restrictions. As an American, it would be like driving from Illinois to Iowa, or Iowa to Nebraska, or Nebraska to Colorado. No border there. There's no border. Just go across, and suddenly, if you're in Nebraska, suddenly you're in Colorado, okay? So this was the Single European Act, and that is called Common Market, or some people call it Single Market, okay? And that is what the European Union is today. It's a single market or a common market, but this was the treaty that made that. And it started, the treaty was signed in 1986, and the target date was January 1993 for the single or common market to be realized. Okay. Then also in 1986, 87, the European community created new powers over the environment to control the environment. And why the environment? Well, you know, air pollution, water problems, you know, all these things, they don't have borders. They go across member state borders. So it was very important for the community to control the environment. Research and development, new powers for Brussels, for the community over pushing, sponsoring research and development among the member states, and regional policy. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Regional policy is developing the poor regions of this European community. And then finally, in the 1980s, the creation of legal status for the European Council, this regular meeting of the presidents and prime ministers of the European community, and European political cooperation. We talked about that earlier. Remember the regular meeting of the foreign ministers of the member states, the foreign ministers, okay? Now remember, now we have 9 countries. So we have the original 6, but now we also have, in addition to that, Greece, Portugal, and Spain. So now we have 9 member states at this time in history. Okay, today we have 27, of course. 1989, the European Community adopts what's called the Social Charter. The Social Charter. And what was the Social Charter? Equal opportunity for workers, working conditions. How long can a worker work per week? How many hours of work? And integration of those excluded from the labor market. You know, no discrimination based on your race or your color, your gender. This is integration of those excluded from the labor market. That was the Social Charter. That was debated in 1989. It's fully integrated now into the European Union. Now we come to the conclusion of this first lecture. 1991-93, Treaty on European Union. Students, this is one of the big ones, sometimes called the Maastricht Treaty. It was negotiated in Maastricht, Netherlands, and it changed the community into a real union. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, the community was mostly about economic integration, integrating economics, remember the free trade area, customs union, a single or common market, all that stuff. But now it's going to be more political, a political union. What does that mean, political? Well, it means basically that this union is going to have more control over other areas of policy, such as legislative policy, the legal systems of the member states, the criminal codes and systems of the member states, defense and foreign policy. All that is more political. So those things that are not economic is this European Union is going to be controlling it more and more. Students, this was the idea of Jean Monnet. Yeah, this was the idea of the founders of Europe, a real federal union, not just a confederal economic cooperation, but a real federal, real political union, okay? So this was a big victory for the Federalists, the Treaty on European Union. It created actually what was called the three-pillar system. What were the three pillars? Well, the original European community, the coal and steel, right? The atomic energy, and the European economic community, those three called the European community. It created then a very political pillar, common foreign and security policy. Common foreign, very political, yeah. Uniting the member states in their foreign and security policy. And finally, justice and, police and judicial cooperation in criminal matters. That's a long phrase. Some people call it justice and home affairs. And basically it means cooperating in criminal legislation, which is kind of important, right? If you have a union and you have criminal activity that's going across the member state borders, which a lot of criminal activity is doing, not only terrorist activity, but mafia, human trafficking, all these things, it's very important to have this type of unity, this cooperation and a unified way of managing criminal activity. And so that was, again, a very political pillar. So we have this first one, the EC is the economic pillar. Then we have the foreign and security policy, which is very political pillar. And then we have the police and judicial cooperation, which is, again, very political. Yeah, it's non-economic, yeah. It also, this treaty on European Union, also created more powers for the European Parliament. What do I mean here? Well, we're going to talk about this when we talk about the institutions. But the Parliament before the Treaty on European Union didn't have much power. It was more recommending. It could recommend. After this treaty, it gets real authority, real power. It created a committee on the regions to fund poor regions. It created the European Ombudsman. Maybe you've heard about this ombudsman. If you have a problem in your member state is not following EU laws or regulations, you can contact the ombudsman for help. Created Europol. That goes to that, remember when we talked here about police and judicial cooperation, Europol is part of that. It's basically a database of criminal activity throughout the European Union to monitor it and to share information with member states. I remember, students, a few years ago, my car was stolen here in Slovakia, and I was looking for my car, and I contacted the police, and they said, oh, we already know about your car. How do you know? Europol. They already had information about that. Yeah, interesting. Created the social chapter, which becomes the social charter of the EU. Students, whenever you hear the word social, it means workers, employment, protecting workers, worker rights, hours of employment, safety in the workplace. All that comes from the word social. And when you study the European Union, very often what you learn is that the European Union has these types of words that they use, which actually mean other words. And they do that to make it a little softer. Why did they call it social and not employment or worker? Well, some of the countries at that time, like the United Kingdom, they didn't like that. They want to manage their own worker rights. They didn't like the EU to do that. So the EU has a whole language to soften its what it is doing. Yeah. It created a target date for EMU, for the monetary union. I believe it was 1999 and then 2004 for the euro, creation of the euro. And then it created a new concept, never before in the history of Europe, the European citizenship. So we, Europeans are now citizens, yeah, of this EU. And the EU has a passport, as you may know. Some people have the EU passport. And this is the list in Ukrainian. And don't worry if you don't understand all of these things. I will be talking more about that, and your other instructors will certainly, Professor Alina will certainly discuss these also, some of these things. So this is just to give basic information now as we go through this history. Okay, so let's continue. So as we see, there were two big waves of European integration before 1993. There was the big wave from 1950 to 1967. And then there was another big wave of integration from 1987 to 1993. In the middle there wasn't so much integration. The first wave, as we know, was because of men like Robert Schuman, Jean Monnet, and Konrad Adenauer. Please remember those three big names. Those are kind of important to remember. That was the first wave, 1950, starting. The second wave was due to men like Jacques Delors, another big name. He was the European Commission president from 1985 to 1997. He was the one who pushed the single or the common market. He pushed the Treaty on European Union. He pushed monetary union, all that stuff. He did that. Jacques Delors, very famous name. Students, here's the conclusion. We have an integration process that is very dynamic, but it starts and stops. You know, you will see this in the history of European integration after World War II. Had a very strong start, then it stopped for many years, and then it started again. So you can say that this process is a starting and a stopping type of process, sometimes going backwards, like with the British and Brexit, yeah? But basically, the integration continues, and perhaps it will continue to become even more federal union in the future, okay? So that's the end of this first lecture. So let me go out of that now as we kind of go back to our thing, and I'll set up the second lecture now. And the second lecture will be about the institutions.
David, may I ask our students, is it better to organize discussion after the first lecture, or just move everything after the second?
Yeah, I think it's better to go with the first. So let's do the discussion now. Yeah.
Yeah, because very big information, so a huge number of information. Yeah, okay. Any questions?
I have one question.
I have, please tell your name, because I have one.
Daria.
Daria. Okay, Daria will be the first one, and Alexandra will be the second. Okay, Daria, go on.
Hello, I have some type of question, like for you, what country played the main role when it joined the EC? Is the type of country?
Very good question. Which country played the main role? I would say two countries played the main role, France and Germany. Without France and Germany, there would be no European integration, I'm sure. no European-wide integration. There would be maybe a Benelux cooperation and a Nordic, a Scandinavian cooperation, but it was really necessary to have France and Germany to come together at the beginning to start the process. Because remember, France and Germany were the two big enemies in Europe, always fighting, always having conflict and war. France and Germany, France and Germany. So they were the key to making this European integration work. And I believe that when they came together with the Schuman Declaration, the Schuman Plan, that was really the nucleus of the growing of this European integration to European Union today.
Thank you.